What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. Moving on to the mailbag, and then we'll get out of here for the day. First question. You should collab with Adam Mares from DNVR. You two are so knowledgeable about the game of basketball. First of all, thanks for the kind words about myself and also for Adam as well. I really enjoyed working with Adam today. It was super easy to talk basketball with. Super smart guy. Had a ton of fun. Went for an hour. Talked about basically a lot of the same games that we talked about today. But you can find that on the All NBA podcast YouTube feed. So go check that out. Next question. If the MVP is a race, Tatum somehow is running in the opposite direction. So this was just a funny comment, but I wanted to use it to just kind of talk about the MVP race because I didn't talk about this over the last couple of weeks just simply because I didn't think it was interesting enough. But, this comment kind of gave me an excuse to talk about it for a second. I never considered Tatum legitimately for MVP. And the main reason why is because, to me, if you're not actually in that top tier of superstars in the league, you just don't qualify for the MVP conversation. And that's the thing. Tatum is the best player on the best regular season team in the league, but there's a couple of pieces of context. One, he's playing for, in my opinion, the most talented starting five in the league. Two, Boston is playing in an Eastern Conference that is really weak at the bottom and has a lot of opportunities to just rack up massive wins that inflate stats and inflate advanced metrics. For instance, I'm sure you guys saw this stat after the game. After last night, Boston is 33-7 against the Eastern Conference. They are 15-7 against the Western Conference because the Western Conference, top to bottom, just has significantly more talent down. The East top is very talented, but the bottom of the East has a lot of automatic wins, so to speak. And I think that's reflected league-wide in records between Eastern Conference and Western Conference teams. But to me, the standings reflect more just how much better Boston is than the rest of the East. And then as far as the MVP race goes, he's the best player on the team, but he's not as good as Jokic. He's not as good as Luka. He's not as good as Giannis. And those guys are just doing more with less. And so for me, I never really realistically considered Tatum for that MVP spot. Next question. Hi, Jason. Love the content from Australia. Watching the Luka Kyrie pairing Cook defenses is great viewing, but it also got me wondering about the future of pairing two-star guards as building blocks. We've seen Fox and Halliburton thrive separately. Questions about the Trey Murray and Mitchell Garland combo as a long-term solution, and even a young potential superstar duo like Cade and Ivy raise the issue whether they can thrive together down the line. If you were coaching two young star guards in the making, what skills would you prioritize them to focus on to maximize their own team success? And what potential red flags would you look out for should they success that would suggest they're better off on separate teams? Having followed you for a bit, I'll guess pull-up shooting is right there. Thanks for these shows. Always learn something new every episode. Thanks for supporting the show. Here's the thing. As it comes down to the two guards thing, it really just comes down to, if you're the expression, you are who you can guard, you can have two-star guards as long as they're different archetypes. So, for instance, if you have a skill guard, let's say that you had Steph Curry, but let's say your two was prime Dwayne Wade, who's one of the best defensive players in the league and a real downhill athlete. That, I think, is a pairing of star guards that would work because they have a lack of redundancy. They don't step on each other's toes. They bring different things to the table. That is a defensive backcourt that can fly. Does that make sense? So in general, when I'm looking at any star duo, I want one of them to be really good at different stuff than the other guy. Take Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, for example. Jamal Murray is this perimeter shot making piece, and Nikola Jokic is this physical imposition around the rim piece and playmaking piece, right? They perfectly complement each other. If you wanted a star next to Jokic, it would ideally be a guy that can run two-man game with him and hit tough over-the-top pull-up jump shots. It makes perfect sense. Think Kyrie Irving and LeBron James. LeBron was the bully ball mismatch attacking forward that brought all the athleticism and defensive tools to the table. Kyrie Irving was the guy. LeBron is the guy who loves to rest while he's playing. Kyrie Irving was the guy they could throw the basketball to, and he could go stand on the left wing, maybe shoot a catch and shoot three now and then. But Kyrie Irving can just run the offense for a brief stretch and be that skill guard, right? That to me is the big piece. Is you want to have a lack of redundancy. So for instance, like let's take De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton. I do think that could have worked in the long run, but it would have required De'Aaron Fox to basically become one of the best two-way guards in the league to really focus on the defensive end of the floor. But like, there's no doubt that could have worked in the long run, because I view Tyrese as the skill guard and De'Aaron Fox to me is like the athlete guard in that pairing. De'Aaron Fox has always been a little bit of an inconsistent defensive player, although I think he's capable of being an awesome defensive player. Next question. LOL, I'm not letting MPJ shoot, but I get your point. You close out late, make him drive so that he can finish, but he doesn't handle well. Again, I this was in reference to a point I made at the end of last night's show about how I would guard if I was Boston. Basically, I said I wouldn't want to live with Jokic and Gordon hitting shots right around the rim. I would want to bring help either from the baseline, but then bring that weak side corner guy to get inside position on Gordon and box him out and force Jokic to make a skip pass, or I'd double from the front side to force Jokic to make kickouts to the perimeter. But the main point there is like, yeah, I don't want MPJ to shoot, but like MPJ, I've talked about the difference between shot value in the large sample size versus shot value in the individual possession. So for instance, an MPJ catch and shoot three, just to make the math easy, if MPJ's wide open, let's just say he makes 50% of them, right? That's 1.5 points per shot. That's a really high percentage shot, right? I would have to shoot 75% at the rim to be on a hook shot or something, on any other type of shot, to be as efficient as Michael Porter Jr. on a catch and shoot three, right? But on the individual possession, it's only a 50% shot. Right? The statistic means nothing to the individual, both in life and in basketball, in my opinion. Like, the statistic is what happens in the big picture, but on that individual possession, you're down to the field goal percentage at that point, right? So for instance, if let's say Jokic shoots 65% on hook shots, that's a lower percentage shot by points per possession. I shouldn't say lower percentage. It's a lower value shot by points per possession than a Michael Porter Jr. wide open catch and shoot three. But on the individual possession, the Michael Porter shot, he's going to miss half the time. Whereas the Jokic shot around the basket, he's going to miss it 1 out of 3 times. And probably if you get him to miss, you brought baseline help, and Aaron Gordon's going to get an extra possession about half of those times. So like the individual possession, that around the rim stuff, is so much more valuable than the big picture stuff when it comes down to the 3-point shot. So what I was saying is, obviously leaving a Michael Porter Jr. or a KCP wide open is not a good option. But here's the thing. We know Porzingis can't guard Jokic one-on-one. We know the baseline help leaves Aaron Gordon open underneath the basket. Those are super high percentage shots. So to me, it's more of a lesser of two evils kind of thing. Next question. How would you rank this version of the Nuggets among the championship winning teams of the last 10 to 15 years? As you have said, Denver has built a near perfect roster around Jokic, who is by far the best player in the world today. However, at what point does accumulating elite talent just outpower everything else? For instance, as good as the Nuggets are, most people wouldn't give them much of a chance against the Warriors of 2017-18, who sacrificed their roster depth to bring in KD. So I do think the Nuggets are on the same tier. I shouldn't say on the same tier. Let me put it this way. The only two teams of the last 15 years that are better than Denver are the Miami Heat team that repeated and the KD Steph Warriors that repeated. Those are the only two teams that are on their level, right? Denver's not, I don't think they deserve to be put on that level, because it's hard to win 2 championships in a row. And here's the thing. I think the Nuggets, I'm way higher on them than I was to start the season. I told you I'd be surprised if they didn't win the title if they were healthy, but it's still like a coin flip, right? Because like Boston has a much easier path out of the Eastern Conference. Denver could be in for some bloodbaths out west. Boston does have a lot of talent and some room for improvement. Like, Denver doesn't have as much room for improvement between now and June as Boston does. Boston can figure some shit out and get better. So like that's my point. I'm picking Denver. I think Denver is the safe bet, but there's always, it's really difficult to win NBA championships. So like, I don't want to jump the gun. And I don't think I'd ever put them above the 2017-2018 Warriors, because like they literally were just so much better than everybody. To give you an idea, going into the 2018 season off of the 2017 championship, when they won 15 straight playoff games, The Warriors had negative odds to win the title in preseason, meaning if you bet $100 to pick the Warriors to win the title in 2018 and they won, you would get less than $100 in winnings. That's how dominant that Golden State team was. Denver, before last night's game, I haven't looked at the odds since, before last night's game, even as good as they've looked this year, they were plus 450 to win the title on DraftKings. So that just goes to show you the difference in just the level of like talent that team had. But it was more because of like they had two of the top 3 players in the league. And they had Klay Thompson, who was an awesome defensive player and the second best shooter of all time. And they had Andre Iguodala, who's the best wing defender in the league at that time. And they had Draymond Green, who was arguably the best defensive player overall in the league at that time. So like there's kind of another level there. However, there will be an interesting conversation to have about this team and the 2012-2013 Miami Heat teams if Denver can win the title this year. And I'm inclined to pick Denver in that specific matchup because Miami just, because of Dwayne Wade's decline, because Chris Bosh got hurt in that 2012 run, like I've seen a lot of talk about, there's so much talk about because of Udonis Haslem and Norris Cole coming out talking about LeBron and the Heat. And it's so funny to me because it's just something I think people are writing some revisionist history on a bunch of different fronts. First of all, I think that when LeBron, like I saw a Jeff Teague quote, something about how like everyone thought that shit was weak when LeBron went to Miami. For the record, at the time, it kind of was. Like what LeBron did going to Miami was supposed to be more or less like what KD did going to the Warriors. What saved LeBron's ass was he got humiliated the first year, which made him a better basketball player. And so he went up a crazy level. 2, Chris Bosh got hurt in the 2012 postseason, which made them have to play. It made LeBron play desperate basketball to beat Indiana and then desperate basketball to beat Boston, right? And then 3, Dwayne Wade rapidly declined after the 2011 finals, was never the same player. He was a top-tier superstar in 2011, like a second-tier superstar in 2012, 2013, and like a third-tier superstar in 2014. And so as a result, LeBron's intended dominant team turned into just another one of the best teams in the league, which forced LeBron to play heroic basketball to win 2 championships. So now when we look back at the Miami Heat runs, we look at it as like, man, that was some unbelievable basketball from LeBron. However, Kevin Durant went to the Golden State Warriors. They stayed healthy. They absolutely murdered everybody. And so everyone looks at it differently because we never had to see KD play desperate. We never had to see KD like, holy shit, like we're down 3-2 on the road here. We got to make this happen. Holy shit, game 7 against Indiana. Holy shit, game 7 against San Antonio. Like we never saw that because Golden State was just so much better than everybody. LeBron intended for that to be the case in Miami, and then it didn't break out that way. And so he had to be great. So that's kind of unrelated to what I was saying, but I just wanted to get that off my chest after the comments that were flying out around those Heatles. But that said, I will be curious to see where we rank Denver in the big picture after if they do win the title this year, because I think that I'd be inclined to put them above those Miami Heat teams. Not that I think Jokic and LeBron at that era are in a similar tier in terms of a ceiling, but I thought that Miami Heat team wasn't as good top to bottom as this Denver team was, and so I'd probably pick Denver over them. But they got to close the deal. They got to win another title this year. 3 more questions and we're out of here. Hey, Jason, love the show. Keep up the great work. I was wondering what you think the issue is with Boston's bad habits. Is it a coach or a lack of IQ? Feels like they've had more or less the same issues under 3 different coaches. Granted, lots of personnel changes and player growth, but still feels like the same glaring issues throughout. So Joe Mazzulla in particular, I actually talked about this a lot with Adam Mares today, but to me, the freedom is almost gone too far. So when you have 5 really good shot creators on the same floor together, it gets a little tough because there's not a clear hierarchy. So like for Denver, for instance, everything runs through Murray and Jokic late. Even those like early second quarter, early fourth quarter stretches, it's like Murray's just dribbling the air out of the basketball looking for his own shot the whole time. There's a lot of equal opportunity with Boston. They kind of just play basketball. And so as a result, like, that continues into crunch time. It's like those 2 possessions that Drew Holiday took over. Like Drew Holiday took those 2 random. Like here's another question we had. Our last one. I don't like the fact that Jason compares Drew taking those last shots for the Celtics to KCP taking such shots for the Nuggets, saying the Nuggets would never do that and they are more deliberate. In my opinion, KCP and Drew Holiday are nowhere near the same players. And the fact that the Celtics have so much talent in their 5-man unit, I think their offense has to be free-flowing so they can maximize each player. 100% agree throughout like certain chunks of the game, right? Like outside of your starting groups, late second quarter, late first quarter, early second quarter, late third quarter, early fourth quarter. You want to be free flowing. You want everybody playing your game. However, you run the risk when you play equal opportunity basketball of either everybody being in a rhythm or nobody being in a rhythm. And that is part of what makes Boston so hot and cold. And yeah, they've been mostly hot against the Eastern Conference, but like that's what makes them so hot and cold is they have these stretches where all of them go out of rhythm because there isn't a clear hierarchy. So like to me, an easy solution there is I would have pet actions for your best players that I'd run at the end of the games. If that's Tatum Porzingis pick and roll, that's Derek White Porzingis pick and roll. If it's Jaylen Brown Tatum 2-man game, whatever it is that you decide to do, I don't think you could do that because teams would probably just switch it. But like you got to find some sort of like hierarchy that you go to in big moments because it makes it more likely that those players will be in rhythm in those moments. Because it's like Tatum after the game. Like I totally disagreed with that comment from Tatum about how he wanted to kind of like he didn't want to hijack the game. No. If Jaylen Brown is bringing it to that level, you got to meet him there. You got to meet him there. Jaylen Brown's not shooting the ball every possession down the floor. Just because he's hot doesn't mean you can't be involved. But to me, like, that's where having a clear hierarchy does make sense. You're right. Drew Holiday's not the same type of player as KCP. And, like, he is a guy that can create a shot off the bounce at a higher level. But he's not as good as at creating a shot off the bounce as Jayson Tatum or Jaylen Brown or Derek White. So, when you do that, even if he does make the shot, you're worried. And he did. By the way, he made 2 big ones at the end of the game, and it worked out. Like that's playing the results, in my opinion. But being more deliberate about running pet actions for the same players in big moments at the beginning of games and at the end of games, I think would go a long way towards kind of getting them to have more consistent rhythm in those environments. Last question. With Cat's injury, how do you think Minnesota should structure their rotation? They went with Kyle Anderson, but that is a spacing nightmare for me. I would start and close with Naz Reid, and then try to keep one of him or Gobert on at all times. So I talked about this a little bit in the Timberwolves segment that we did. So in case you missed that, if you're just watching the mailbag episode, go back. Timberwolves fans, we did a whole breakdown. But I would do it matchup related. Would not go with Kyle Anderson, though. I thought that was a disaster on both ends of the floor. I don't think he's good enough defensively or offensively to make up for it. Kind of was disappointed because Kyle Anderson is a guy that is capable of being very good defensively, but he just hasn't been good enough. But I would just base it on the matchup. I think there's versions of this against smaller teams where you could go with Nickeil Alexander-Walker and go with like Ant, Conley, NAW, and Jaden McDaniels alongside Gobert and just defend the hell out of the basketball. At least because Nickeil is just a better offensive player than Kyle Anderson off the ball, and he can defend in space. But then there are going to be matchups that are too big and you need to go bigger. The Lakers game that's coming up on Sunday is actually a good example of this. I would go with Naz Reid. Because at least you have the physical in position. He's kind of like actually a reasonable facsimile of Karl Towns, although he's not as good because he can shoot the 3 and he can attack closeouts. So like that would be what I would do. I'd base it on the matchups. But the reality is like it is flawed options now that Karl Towns is out of the picture, which is unfortunate.